All right. Welcome to Dry Bones. My name is Kathleen. I have my master's in anthropology with an emphasis on archaeology. And you have come to my channel, which is all about faith and archaeology. I like to say on this channel, you don't have to leave your faith or your brains at the door. Today, I am super excited because my brother is with me. And this is my first time to have a guest. He's my first time guest. He and I have some awesome conversations when, off camera and stuff like that. And I thought it would be really fun to bring that to you guys. Also, because it's also for a technical reason as well. I am getting ready to have my second guest, who is Dr. Ken Wolgamuth. He's a geologist, also a Christian and old earth creationist like me. And he is going to be coming on to talk about Noah's flood, because then after that, I'm going to be doing a video about Noah's flood. I hope you guys are subscribed so you can get notifications when those come out. I'm really excited about all of this. So my brother is on here. One, because like I said, I really enjoy our conversations. I've been wanting to do this since I started this podcast, but also to test out to make sure I've got everything good to go and I know how to record things. So stuff like that. All right. So Calvin, welcome to Dry Bones. I'm really happy to have you on. It's so weird to be interviewing my brother, but it's fun. We've already been spending a lot of time having some conversations. Calvin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your joys are, what you do, and just a little bit of insight about you.
My name is Calvin Kelly. I have a lot of interests, and I'm ADD, so I get attracted by bright and shiny ideas. So I bounce around. I've bounced around a lot of different career fields. I've spent the most as a teacher. That's kind of a challenge every day,
What kind
having
of
to keep
teacher?
track of all the kids.
Mm-hmm.
A high school teacher generally. I'm teaching geometry now.
What have you taught in the past?
Pretty much a lot of the science, mainly physics, but mostly maths from sixth grade to senior. So,
Okay, sorry.
different types.
I didn't mean to keep interrupting you. Go ahead.
So I've done, so I've also worked as a tutor and such. So it's, I don't know, I enjoy it. But I like hiking near the Appalachian Trail. So I go out and, this month is, now that it's May, I'll be later on this month, I'll be feeding hikers, which are nice and grateful. Strangely enough, they're not used. They're not, they're generally not. What's the word for? They generally have money, or at least they've planned ahead. But there's something about bringing someone fresh food when all they're doing is carrying all their other food on their back that they really appreciate the change. And I just, I find as well, you can see some of my books, a very small amount of my books behind me. I am a hopeless bibliophile, so I will probably be reading, the books yet to read. But you always need more books before you read the books you have waiting to read. So anyway, so we have questions. We like to find answers. I like the dopamine burst. Of course, phones are trapping me a lot because they give me dopamine, and all my brain chemistry gets addicted.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to I've had to turn off Facebook and just delete it from my phone before, just to kind of keep
for those
myself.
of us who are capable of such an act, we would appreciate that. But yeah.
Yeah.
Taunt me some more. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So great. So what I did is I sent Calvin, just so we could focus the conversation. I sent Calvin my episodes on Cain and the Neanderthals. So that's sort of what we're going to be mostly focusing on. But I think he sent me some of his questions. We might delve into some other areas, but we'll mostly be covering those. I will link those. They should be here somewhere. I will put them somewhere here. I never know where that thing is going to put them, but I will put them up here, and so you can check those out too if you haven't already. These have been two that I have really enjoyed. So, Calvin, which one do you want to start first, and where do you want to go with this?
Actually, you kind of distracted me with the bright and shiny question, and with the bright and shiny, and I'm wondering, is Cain's descendants a dead end? Did they all die in the flood?
Mm.
So why do we need to worry about Cain if they all are dead?
Well, that's a really good question. That comes with, I would say, if you've listened to my podcast, you'll see that I am uh, considering this idea, or have been going over this idea of, you've got Adam and Eve, you've got Seth, their line of Seth that kind of comes from after Cain leaves and after Abel is dead. And so you've got Cain's people over here, you've got Seth's people over here. I have to imagine that they eventually married and intermingled. And so by the time we get to Noah's flood, is it possible even Noah could have some of that lineage inside of him, and maybe his wives, or the son, his wife and the son's wives? So I do think they continue on in that sense. I think it's very likely that they continue on in that sense.
Cool.
Yeah. And then you've
Reasonable
also got
idea.
the whole Nephilim situation going on there, which I'm going to cover in another video as well. But yeah.
Well, we're talking about Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, incestuous relationships,
Or
um,
not.
or not.
It's an
Um,
assumption that it's incestuous.
but I have my own heresies, which I'm sure will spawn comments. But my heresy is that um, Adam was made in the image of God, and God is a spiritual being. So when they say Adam was made in the image of God, that means Adam's spirit, Adam's soul is in the image of God. And that Garden of Eden, at that point, you can kind of disassociate it. Adam, of course, is made from clay, but as we are in our modern society, clay, of course, is the stuff that stars are made of. So we are.
Explain that.
Mm, Matter is what stars are made of.
Okay.
And all the matter on Earth eventually was originally was somewhere in a star somewhere. So we're all so if we go that okay, made him from clay. I was like, okay, how does that deal? Well, okay, if you say that Adam's spirit, um, then if it has energy and mass, which it may not, then it would be made of star stuff. Which could also be equated to clay, which is the basic, foundation of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if we're saying that, then when there was no labor, there was no birth, there was no um, shame, because they did not have that concept.
Mm.
So then they were brought to Earth, and kicked out of the eternal heaven, Eden, and at that point they were placed into some of our hominids, and from there that line has souls. Now, alternatively, we could say that that Adam and Eve were metaphoric,
Mm-hmm.
and that the lineage, and again, I'm working off an old Earth, the lineage developed ideas and consciousness and thought of good and evil through the millennia of years of development, including the Neanderthals. And that when they achieved consciousness at this point, good and evil, that's where the story picks up. And there's a
That's really
they
interesting.
the
I've not heard that before. That's an interesting take on
this
that.
is all being completely made up for me. So don't look for background to this. And I'm sure the comments will tell me you are such a stupid person. But if you're going with that, geneticists said that some tens of thousands of years ago there was a choke point that whatever was going on, there was only about 1,200. I think, if I remember correctly, it was 13,000 years ago. There was a die off of humans, Homo sapiens, and 13,000 years ago, there was only 1,200 of them, and then the genetics from there spread out. So don't know how that works, but that gives you a few touch points.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I mean, I'm not heard that. I mean, but that doesn't mean it's not out there. It just means I haven't heard of it. I mean, 1,200 is very little, as you can imagine. It's extremely
Yeah,
little. And I'm curious if also, so 12,000 years ago, though. So 12,000 years ago and about 1,200 people.
and it was during the middle of we still had glaciers, and so
Yeah. Well, I was also trying to think, but yeah, that would be well after we've seen those. 'Cause Neanderthals probably went extinct around 40,000 years ago, I think. So yeah. So they would have been referring to only Homo sapiens. So that's just kind of, yeah, that's something to look into. That's interesting.
I'm sure one of your viewers will actually correct me and tell me it wasn't 13,000 years ago, it was 80,000 years ago, or some other thousand years
But
ago.
I mean,
But
at some point, if it went really low like that, so I know that Noah's Ark proponents for global uh, Noah's, no global flood, they do have. I know that's in one of my notes to look into further, where there was this bottleneck, and I'm sure there have been bottlenecks but I haven't looked into the studies behind that yet. But I will before that video comes out, and I wonder if it's relating to that same thing.
well, bottlenecks are also important. If the Lord is my shepherd, and what shepherds do is they breed for the traits they want. Part of that, and when we look at Morgan, the Morgan horse, which we had one when we were
Mhm.
younger. If you look at what they do to fix the characteristics of that breed, is they inbreed them. They breed
Mhm.
them back into each other. So perhaps that was part um, the of God's
Design.
plan. There is that he said, okay, this is my people, and I will breed back in to make sure that they are breeding true,
Mm,
and not so much he didn't have to pass on the mechanics of, but that was what he was doing to
yeah. And
pull
so
pull
so
those cousins and sisters back in.
well, that's what I was kind of curious about when you're saying breed back in and that's what God was doing. Are you meaning that he just sort of narrowed the genetic pool by getting rid of a lot? No, you don't mean literally cousins and stuff like or
No, I'm going back to the Cain situation
so
where
you're thinking
they
that
were
that's
marrying sisters and stuff. That maybe that was this is Numbers 5 and 6 again, or 3 and 5, on the of the people created, having them breed back together, wanting to fix the characteristics, because Adam essentially, if you go with genetics, Eve was Adam's clone.
yeah. Hmm.
So and then we want to breed those characteristics back. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I also had not thought of that concept of her being his clone, which I mean, obviously does and doesn't fit because she's female. So obviously she was
Cloning is
different.
a lot. Actually, if you take from what I know about cloning, which could be in my cup, it's not a. But the reason why Dolly the sheep was female was because if you have an egg and you stimulate it, you can actually stimulate and create a clone, without a sperm. You can't make a male. So one of those things saying women don't need men, well, if you just want a pure female society, cloning is kind of one of those. Okay, yeah. But that is if you take his rib or take from his side, however that is interpreted,
Yeah,
you are taking his cells and you are creating a woman, and that's actually an easy boom
but I don't think.
genetics of where God can do anything.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. So I didn't fully follow that. So how did making a clone of Adam create a clone that was female?
because the clones just they come out as female. You can't
That's just how clones work.
well
It's
if you
obviously not a
get
topic I
very
know anything about either, or I know a little bit
yeah,
about it, but
I mean we apparently don't have, I mean, yes, my ignorance, but that's that from what I understand is you can actually take a one of the gametes and use and just simulate it. And when I say just, it's a horribly difficult thing. Dolly, but we have cloned from just an egg and without attaching a sperm to it. So we've just taken and then cloned.
yeah.
Or actually, I think they took an egg, they put the nucleus of a stem cell in there, which is still a cell, but they can just trigger it off.
Hmm.
And again, down below, the comments will tell me that I'm completely wrong and I don't know nothing about what I'm talking about.
Well,
But
I mean,
from what I understand, it is cloning would be easiest as a female.
yeah. Well, and I will say that I think this whole conversation, Calvin, I'm not too worried about being super, super specific. We're just having an off the cuff kind of conversation.
Yeah,
Neither one of us are saying, yes, we're experts in this or experts in that. This is just from what we know of. So I'm not, yeah, people correct us. I don't care. Like I actually, I would love the conversation to continue happening in the comments and where all that can go. And if I actually have asked many times, please correct me if I say something that's wrong because I want to learn from it. I want my viewers to learn from it. So we're just so don't worry too much about that. But yeah, that is really interesting. But I want to kind of go back. So we sort of went off on a rabbit trail there because we were talking about, I know that's surprising.
I'm a rabbit hunter. No, that's what I do. I chase rabbits.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think where we were before that. We were talking about, Cain's. So I do want to keep kind of coming back to this idea though, because you mentioned about Cain and Abel and this marrying of siblings and stuff. And that's one of the things I do talk about in my video is, again, like a lot of, and excuse me, but a lot of young earthers will get onto old earth creationist or secular scientist for this idea of making assumptions about dating methods. And yet there are also a lot of assumptions that get made, such as Cain and Abel were going to marry, or that Cain married his sibling, because there would have only been 3 people on the earth at that time. But there are a lot of other viewpoints that take into account the other creations that God made that he doesn't tell us about, which could have been those hominids that turned into hominins, possibly when they started, and that's where that development into hominid to hominin started happening, is that Cain went out there and those people, because that's what that whole video is about. Who were those people? Who was his wife? Who were these people that he went out and created? It was a whole city that was made. And then suddenly his almost direct descendants, or very soon after, are, metallurgy, they're agriculturists, they're things that we don't see proof of archaeologically in the archaeological record until way after we see this development of a lot of more cognition going on in the hominin space. And so I have a few thoughts about this idea that did Cain marry his sister, because I think there could be a few other answers to that. One is, did he then, were these hominins out there? Were these Neanderthals or Denisovans or Australopithecines? Were they out there, and that's who Cain intermingled with? Am I too loud?
No, Australopithecines would be tiny people.
They were not tiny people. They were tinier.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were tinier, but they were still out there. I mean, and it could have been Homo erectus. It could have been, Homo heidelbergensis. They could have been all these other, I'm sorry. Yes. When you're thinking about Lucy, she was a short person. Yes. So I don't mean it like but my brain, when you said that, went to, and we've talked about this before, and I've forgotten the name of them again. The Homo,
Oh, yeah. Now
on the island. They were on the island. I feel stupid right now that I can't think of the name of them. But anyway, I'll probably go back. The comments will probably tell us. And honestly, what I'll do when I'm editing this, I'll put it. You're going to see a little thing go across the bottom, say, this is what you're talking about. Of course, the other problem is it's gonna play in my brain this entire conversation. But so that's part of my thought, is that that's one thought process, I feel. Did Cain go out? Because you got to think about too, and this is something I mentioned in my video, Cain already knew there were people out there because he was scared of them. And God confirms that he's scared of them. If he's one of the firstborn, these are not his siblings that we just don't hear about. He knows there's something else out there. He's not talking about being afraid of the big animals out there. None of that. He's talking about people that he's scared of. So that makes me think he already had interactions with them, and that they could have been them. The other idea out there is that this pre-Adamic society that was out there, and I don't fully fall into line with that as a thing. I'm saying it's one of the ideas out there, is that there was this whole other world that was created before Adam, and then there was the fall of Satan, Satan's fall, that happened before we get to Adam and Eve being created. And so that could have been when some of those people were created. Some of those hominins were created that Cain went out to, and that's who was populating the rest of the earth. And so that kind of brings me back to your idea about Eden being this place in heaven that then God, because some people will talk about Eden may not have been an actual place on the earth. It could have been, they were in the presence of God, and then they were put down on the earth. And that means they were taken out of the presence, that direct presence of God. And so that's another kind of idea that I'm not fully developing right now But so there could have been all these other beings on the earth that just don't get specifically mentioned in Genesis. Just like there's a lot of things that don't get specifically mentioned in Genesis, And that's where I'm trying to go with some of my conversations about Neanderthals and Denisovans and stuff, is this idea that could even, so we kind of make this assumption that Adam and Eve were Homo sapiens. William Lane Craig talks about them possibly being Homo heidelbergensis. And I got really excited about that because that's where my brain was going before I heard him say that. So I was kind of excited about that. Um, and so could they have been one of these early hominins? Because we do see empathy in the Neanderthals, and stuff like that. So uh anyway, I've been talking a long time, and uh you go.
Well, I liked your story about the one of the things that I always like to look at is they talk about finding these vastly primitive bones where they've had not only human bones but also other um, um, other pack type creatures. I think they've done this, found wolf bones the same way, that
Mm.
where they've had a huge injury and the bones show that they recovered from that huge injury, even though obviously they wouldn't have been able to get food for themselves or care for themselves. So I do like that. That like you said, that was a sign of empathy,
Hmm.
which has also been found in other pack animals, and some that they didn't realize were pack animals until they saw that type of behavior in the bones,
Yeah.
dry bones.
It's it's
Um,
it's applicable in so many ways.
yes, uh, but well, because if they were wet bones, they'd have rotted away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they've got to be dry bones.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's my thinking didn't develop to the Neanderthal and the other offshoots.
Hmm.
Um, I'm, I guess, in my thinking, I'm more of a using man as a concept, as a hominin. So I'm not thinking of which flavor are we talking about. I kind of say God and his relationship with man
Hmm.
or mankind. Um, but yeah, I am kind of I do think that um, when Moses was writing these oral traditions down, we always need to consider that he was talking um, to a mostly illiterate, um, and especially after they were 40 years in the desert and killed off all the older people. He was talking to a population that was illiterate shepherds. So, so a city to them, coming from Egypt, they would know what cities were, but in their language, they were probably dealing with more of a strong point. But we think of cities and we think of 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people. Actually, at 10,000, we think of that as a town.
Hmm.
50,000 is just the smallest of cities.
Hmm.
But when I went to Israel and I saw the ruins of Jericho, it was small. When they talk about how big, how tough Jericho was, like, no, it wasn't. It
Jericho's
was,
very interesting
oh
archaeologically.
yeah.
It's very
But
interesting.
marching 7 times around it, yeah, we could have gotten that done, you know, between breakfast and second breakfast. So I'm still stuck on the other, the hobbits in the islands.
I see.
Um,
Yeah. I'm gonna
yeah,
Google it while you're talking. You talk
yeah,
while I
there you go.
Google it.
So yeah,
Stupid that as an
so
archaeologist I should have to Google this, but I'm going to.
I mean, when we're dealing with this, we're dealing with um a huge variety, because you were talking last time about how a city could have also meant a strong point. So if I'm looking
Uh-huh.
at, a keep on a hill, one of the things that Wales was littered with, where it was just basically, You go up on a hill, put up a palisade, and you put up a tower, and you're done. If that was that, and that's a strong point, that would have fit the category of what you were saying was a city,
Yeah.
as
I
a
mean that
synonym there.
which is true. Um, but you still have to
And now
think
you're
about,
frozen.
oh no, I am.
No, now you're back. Now you're back.
Okay, probably because I'm Googling. Anyway, by the way, it's Homo floresiensis. Yes. So figured it out. All right. Now we can both get that out of our brains. Okay. So
But the words you were talking about last on the cane is that you said that Nod was a land of wandering.
mm-hmm,
You said that east of Eden was away from God.
mm-hmm.
You said that um, he went there and established a house and a city and apparently a family because he had a wife
And sons,
and
yeah. Hmm.
and so for a nomadic tribe, he has done the opposite of wandering.
That's yeah,
He has done.
exactly.
I mean, Nod is wandering, and city is the opposite of that. So he's
Yes.
gone out away from God and has done. He's done permanence in the land of wandering, which I don't know. It all seems contradictory.
Well, right. I mean, so there's several, like I think there's so many layers to what you just said there. One is that, and hopefully I'll keep them straight in my head. So one is like this whole idea of it's called the land of wandering. Nod is means wandering. So that to me, just like all the numbers in the Bible, like it's also I think it lends itself to this. Are we talking metaphorically? Are we talking symbolically? Are we talking a real place or something symbolic or both? So there's like that whole aspect to that story when we're talking about him going out to wandering, but also he talks many times about I'm cursed to wander. God sent him to the land of wandering. So this wander word, did you also pick up on when I talked about like certain groups think about Bigfoot is Cain for that reason and was cursed to wander? I thought,
I went that too, very casual. I'm not the biggest respecter of and this again of Mormon prophets.
yeah, yeah. It was just crazy to me. I think only because I keep hearing more and more crazy things about Bigfoot, and I've never paid like any attention to it before, but it's just more and more. Anyway, but so back to kind of like that whole land of Nod and wandering and going away from God, and that's what it is. And so again, this symbolic going east is going away from God. Again, symbolism. So what is God trying to tell us in this story? And does what he's trying to tell us in the story overcome it being a real story? Or is it a metaphorical story to teach us something? And also this idea that along those lines, the fact that Cain, all right, so God tells him not to sin in his anger and he kills his brother, right? So he's just so he's just like a little child who you tell him to do one thing and they're just going to do the other. So he goes now, he's cursed to wander, and what does he do? He goes out there and establishes himself. And he names it after his son, which is kind of, a little bit of nepotism going on there. And like it's just, but we don't hear this on the Adam and Eve side about Seth too much,
And
I
what does Enoch mean again?
I don't remember. Did I say that in my
Okay,
thing? Sorry.
you did.
We we might
But
cut that part
I thought
out.
it was again, if you're these are oral traditions that were carried through their entire captivity in Egypt. So I kind of find it neat that he goes out, establishes a city, stays in a building made of clay, stone, whatever. And of course, it's the first city, so of course they did it poorly, and then
Yeah.
it fell on him. I'm
Uh-huh.
thinking, yeah, that makes sense. First city you make, it doesn't work out so right. It kills the guy who established the city. So, but then of course you bring up the points that he gets killed by stones, like the one that he probably did on his brother. So,
Just again, it's kind of interesting, sort of of course, that the Bible doesn't tell us that. It was, I think,
No,
the mesh, mesh, why can't I remember these things right now? I'm having to. Um, Meshach,
dialogues, the
what?
dialogues that accompany the Torah.
Yeah, the like concordances kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's where it comes from. Yeah, so Enoch means
Or did
dedicated.
someone just put that in there as, you know what would be really cool? Yeah, he gets killed by stones. That would be
Yeah.
great. You know,
Yeah, because if I'm
his
remembering
house fell down.
yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I know I utilized the Book of Jubilees for that video and the Mishar. Why can't I say that right now? But the Ethiopian Bible. Um
Yeah, you did
and
that a couple times, but then you also talked about the Hebrew concordance as well. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I try to go back to the Hebrew. So Enoch means dedicated. Yeah.
there you go.
All right, cool. What other questions do you have? Or
Which
what
is
other
again opposite from wandering. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So
dedicated, established. You know,
uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. Was there
Now, of
anything?
course,
Yeah, go ahead.
Cain is a gardener. He's not a shepherd. So maybe, and again, this may be a metaphoric tale told about in that ignorance. You know, he hadn't been told that, you know, outright that we don't want to kill our brother, we don't want to, you know, kill each other. Um, and that you know, hubris. You know, he thinks he can. You know, he doesn't apologize. He goes off. So I mean, if we're talking about Cain and Abel as being a metaphoric story, you know, there's a whole lot of, you know, the primitive peoples that were working as slaves. You know, somehow they figured out how to screw up a good thing of having a brother, running the country. So you know, so yeah, so I don't know. It's you know. Now we also you also want to talk about you said that a week was 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
but
In the Book
um
of
if
Jubilees.
if the Bibles, if the I had read somewhere that someone had the opinion that a year for all of these Methuselah and everything, that it was a season, or it wasn't necessarily 365 days. It
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, a season, and those seasons might be um, have different lengths of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not have been Methuselah might not have been 800 plus times 365 days. It might have been much less.
Yeah, I see the
You know,
connection you're making, but I just want to make a clarification there. I see the point you're making, but I want to make a clarification there. When I'm talking about a week is 7 years, it's just what it's called in the
yeah,
Book of Jubilees. It doesn't mean they're literally thinking 1 week equaled 7 years. It's just how they're calling it. Does that make sense?
yeah. I'm
But
just
yeah,
going on years pre-flood.
yeah. Right. But
You
then
know,
there's this idea of like these ages that we hear and all this sort of stuff. Like, were these true years or were they different time frames?
right.
I've also heard like the idea that these were just almost like kingdoms or clans. Like, so they're just, that's why not everybody's labeled. And I'm not saying God's lying when he says that. I'm saying he's making a bigger point than making a history point, you know? And and could these names that are given, and when we're saying 900 years, could it be that that patriarchal line lasted 900 years or something along those lines, rather than it be a true, this was a 900-year-old person? Now that kind of doesn't fully play out. That's just a thought process. It's not a, this is how I actually firmly believe. It's just a thought process, because then you kind of get into But then they talk about Moses more specifically, how old he was, and they specifically name his sons. So I do find it very interesting, although we're not talking about Noah right now, but this idea of
You
how
just went from
late.
Noah to Moses and back.
I did because I've got Noah on the brain because that's the video I'm working on. But we're talking about Moses. But we're also talking about those early genealogies in the Bible. Yeah. And about whether that's what I'm getting back to, is what you were saying about were these true years, or were they, like you were saying, possibly seasons or something like that?
And did they relate to each other? Because does Methuselah's age overlap the flood?
No, it ends right before it.
Okay. So that means, so we know that Noah was this many hundreds of years old when the flood happened.
Well, what do you mean by that?
So I know that from whatever is that um, the different patriarchs lived, and then the next patriarch lived, and the next patriarch lived, and then Methuselah lived, and then Noah lived. So we're saying, when do those years start? Do we start Methuselah's age after his father died? Or do we start
Mm.
Methuselah's age from when his father was the age of 25 and had a child or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that looking at those genealogies, and I've spent a kind of a good deal of time in them. Usually that's not you. Usually it is like he was X amount of old when he had this son, and then it starts. And then the son was this amount old whenever he started having children. So I don't think they're starting the age when they start having children. Um, but I will tell you, so if you were to look at that timeline as an exact, you have Adam still alive when Moses's dad was alive. And that's one of those things that they'll say that's how these stories were so easily passed on, because it's not like you had it passed on through, you had Adam telling Noah's father, and then so like it wasn't like a long line of telephone, if those are true ages. And again, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that I don't believe the Bible. I just question whether God meant it as literal or metaphorical in Genesis 1 through 11. And that's where I feel like it's fine for us to have some. There's just so much symbolic speech in that Genesis 1 through 11. And John Walton, who interesting, he's one of these people I listen to. And interestingly enough, he's the son of Sam Walton. But he talks a great deal. He's a theologian, and he talks a good deal about uh, this idea of that the Bible was, and I think I've said this to you before, and I know I've said it to my audience before, but he talks a good deal about how the Bible was written for us, but not to us. And so you have to think about how they would have imagined a picture, how they would have accepted some of this imagery and stuff like that, and the dates, of these people. So, yeah. Anyway, did I finish that thought through
Yes, you did.
to your satisfaction?
I was trying to figure a way of working in the word twitterpated.
Twitter. Oh, what did I use that on one of those?
Yes.
I use it,
And then
yeah.
you were embarrassed. And I was like, no, it's such a good word. It's a
You
fine
know,
descriptive word.
you know what it reminds me of is the play Oklahoma. Doesn't she say something about being Twitter pated? Yeah. I don't know why that word was in my brain when I recorded that video, but it was. Anyway.
Well, Reader's Digest, years before you were even born, would have a page. It would say towards more colorful speech, and then it would have neat words in there.
Hmm.
Twitterpated would actually be a great additional word because it's so colorful and so, it sounds like kind of what the sound a bird makes when it's so.
Yeah, yeah. So I just kind of I'm gonna back up something here because you mentioned about how something before I was born, and just I meant to say this before. So Calvin and I are one of or we're of five. There's five children. So he's the oldest, and I'm the youngest. So there's
No. Eldest.
he's the eldest because I that makes it sound so much better. And I'm the so is there a different word for youngest that I should use?
Nah.
Okay.
Babe. Baby of the family.
I'm the baby of the family and he's the
There you go.
eldest of the family.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we're 8 years apart, but yeah. All right. All right, Calvin, what else do you have for me? Or what else do
Um,
you want to discuss? Yeah.
Neanderthal.
Okay.
Big head.
Yeah.
How big is their pelvic girdle?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You asked that question and I meant to check, but when you're saying pelvic girdle, are you just saying and this is just my ignorance of
I'm looking
anatomy.
for birth.
Yeah.
One of the
So
things about humans is we got
larger
big
than ours.
heads.
Yes. Oh,
Oh, it is
yes.
large because that also might be a bottleneck, or one of the things holding them back from having a large population, because they're trying to give birth to really big-headed kids.
When
And that
they're
may be why their population stayed so stable for hundreds of thousands of years.
no, so this is very, very interesting. And I think I think I started to touch on it, but it's something that I want to like get my research a little bit more solid before I discuss it too much. But I will tell you that it was something we discussed in school and about this idea. So remember, then you start having the Neanderthals interbreeding with the Homo sapiens. So what do you think that's so the Neanderthal women did have a pelvic girdle wide enough to birth their own babies, right? But then you have these Homo sapiens women that have much more narrow. So what's going to happen if a Homo sapiens female uh, breeds with a breed sounds so like I'm talking about animals, but breeds with a Neanderthal
It's
man?
the word to use.
Yeah. Um, and then they have this really large baby. Yeah. So you probably more had, and there is a study that recently came out. I was like, oh, I've got to jump on that again. It's something I need to put more study into. But I think it came out that when they're looking at the Neanderthal uh, genes that are still in us, somehow they've been able to trace that back to whether it was uh, female Neanderthals or male Neanderthals married, what the majority of that was.
Mitochondrial DNA, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to, so it is because you can imagine that's going to cause a problem if a Homo sapiens woman is trying to birth the head of a Neanderthal baby. Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting, but and it's a very interesting topic that I get kind of excited about, but I just don't know enough about it to speak to the specifics of it. But again, it'll probably be a video either inside of another video or it's a video on its own about that because I do find that very fascinating when you're considering the interbreeding that happened.
Like a Russian doll.
Yes. Yes, my eldest brother. It's like a Russian doll.
Video inside a video.
Yeah.
But do you know why the Neanderthal population stayed so stable for 100,000 years? Because shortly after, Homo sapiens showed up, it went away.
There are so many different theories behind that or hypotheses behind that. So, yeah, not theories, but like ideas behind that. I don't think any of them have gotten solidified to become a scientific theory. But really, so there's not a good answer to that. But a lot of people think that, so even though the Neanderthals had a larger brain, depending upon how that brain was arranged, that they might not have had the same intelligence that Homo sapiens did. We do see Homo sapiens showing a stronger cognitive level. Neanderthals were not stupid by any means, and they definitely had were intelligent, but we're just thinking possibly there were certain areas where the Homo sapiens were more. And I mean, there's just a wide variety of possible reasons that happen. You know, a lot of people, and this is one of these things that always bothers me. And one of my videos is going to be about, are humans special? There's so many. I hear it so often in the scientific world about humans are not special. We're just yet another animal. And I just want to be like, yeah, you're telling me that over a video camera on across the internet. I just can't buy that we're not special. But in that same vein, not but, and in that same vein, it's like this self-hate, self-loathing for humans, Homo sapiens, that some of these people have. And it kind of bothers me because in that same vein, you know, we get blamed for the dying out of everything. When we came along, so and so died out. Or, you know, or it could have been this other animal that overhunted that animal, you know, or it could be, you know, just whatever happened. And so, in that same sense, could it have been when Homo sapiens came along, they killed off all the Neanderthals, or could it another very strong hypothesis about what happened to the Neanderthals is not that they actually died off, they just became integrated with Homo sapiens. And that to me is the most logical pathway as to what happened to Neanderthals. They just became more and more a part of us. And then also probably died off. They did, I do believe there is evidence that they were in much smaller communities. So there might have been a little bit more inbreeding with them, and that might have caused some problems. Not overall, but just because of living in these smaller communities than the Homo sapiens seem to. It could have been, even though they were cold adapted, when we went through these ice ages, maybe where they were living up in the higher regions than the Homo sapiens were, could it have just been too much for them, you know? And so it killed off a lot of them, but not, and then the rest absorbed into us and the Denisovans. Because there's a lot of
I mean,
evidence.
if you're cohabitating with someone who you have limited reproductive ability with, the human males could basically breed with any of the females in the tribe,
That's a good point. Yeah.
but the Neanderthal males could only breed with Neanderthal women of the same interbred level. So the half breeds, you know, in a lot of ways would not be able to breed with the full Neanderthals because they would still have a narrower channel. So just being put the nicest color on it is that they said, "Oh wow, we love you. We want to be in the same tribe," and they immediately bonded. In a few generations, the Neanderthals were gone
Mhm.
because the male side couldn't breed with anybody that wasn't already that wasn't at their level of Neanderthal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that would actually work.
Hmm. That's why I think to me
Or
it's the
the Homo
most
sapiens
likely.
just killed them all and
Yeah.
we're fur.
Because we're awful.
So well, no, because strangers meeting each other,
Yeah.
you know, we're gonna take some Neanderthal woman home. They're big, but we can have babies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, did want to talk about uh Neanderthal, Sasquatch. Your comment from that video said that Sasquatch was, you know, waist high when he's on a horse or something like that.
Oh no, so
But
that's yeah.
he also said that he was dark. So the text now, one of the things about Mormonism is until 50 years ago, one of the tenets of their faith was that in the Book of Mormon, the cataclysmic fight between the good tribe of Israel and the bad tribe of Israel, where the bad tribe of Israel wiped out the good tribe because they were thinking that the people over in the Americas were tribes of Israel. Is that they and the evil tribe, because they wiped out the good the good tribe of Israel um, over here in the Americas, that God cursed them with having dark skin. So a
Mm,
basic tenet of their faith that they have changed 50 years within the last 50 years is that dark skin indicates evil.
mm,
So having the Sasquatch, one being shooed off by in the name of God, but also he was characterized as having dark skin.
yeah, yeah.
So I thought,
That is very
okay,
interesting.
that kind of tracks with the Mormon stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and just to kind of clarify what you said there, just for my audience, is that when you said about that he was waist high and he was on the horse or whatever, that is, it was a quote from one of the Mormon um, prophets, is where that comes from. So I don't want anybody to think I said that. All right. So what were you about to say?
Um, well, I've already brought up the point of did man have a covenant with God at the time of Cain?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Bible talks about that. That's a interesting one. So,
Now we ate from the tree of good and evil, of knowledge of good and evil,
uh-huh.
but had God communicated what good and evil was and that murder bad? You know?
Oh, I mean, obviously that's a more of a theological question. But just my own thoughts on that would be, you know, I think sin has more to do, and that's what that was. It was sin. It had more to do with not the every single thing that God tells us to do. I think sometimes, God gives us common sense also. And I think, Cain wanting to, yeah, yeah. Um,
I'm laughing.
yeah. Cain wanting to kill his brother, obviously that was an act of jealousy. It was an act of all these, or what, it obviously did not come from,
And hubris.
yeah, yeah. So I would think that it wouldn't, even though it wasn't exactly like a sin, God did tell him though, do not sin in your anger, you know? I mean, so he did know not to kill his brother.
And
Whether,
sin, at a very basic definition, is um, um, doing other than God's will.
yeah, I think that's probably a good, yeah. Yeah,
I think
something that
that's the
separates
legit
you from,
definition.
oh, okay, okay. I was thinking along the lines of something that separates you from God, which, by the way, I know this has nothing to do with our topic, but one of the other things that I want to discuss at some point with a theologian, because it has nothing to do with archaeology, but is this idea of, the tree of life and death, and like, well, why didn't Adam and Eve die when they ate the fruit? And sometimes, I think the Bible uses this phrase "die" in a separation from God, not necessarily my heart stops beating. And so they did die because they were expelled from that walking with God thing. And I just wonder if too many times we're using that word die too literally. And that's not what God was trying to say in that. But anyway, I know it's a total other topic, but yeah.
Well, and I'm going to bring in, one of the books I like. Um, when uh, Arwen chose to marry um, Strider.
Who is Arwen
Um,
and Strider? I don't know these.
oh,
Sorry.
Lord of the Rings. Lord of the
Oh, I
Rings.
should. Oh, okay. Well,
Arwen
yeah,
Arwen
I
is
should have
an
known.
elf
You're so funny.
who is immortal. And she is of the world. But when she decided to marry, she actually, like her uncle, the head of the. Anyway, I'll not go that down there. But this idea was communicated that um, death isn't necessarily die that moment. She by marrying Strider, she embraced that now she would be mortal.
Oh,
And I think that's what happened with Adam and Eve is they didn't die, but they became mortal.
more. Yeah. Yeah. That's another. Yeah. That is something I've heard of before
And
too. Yeah.
they had a the clock started ticking on their biological clock.
Which also to me is one of these things about the age of the earth. At what point was Adam's first day of life? Like when we count how old he was it from the time that they ate the fruit, or was it from the time he was created?
And he could have lived for millennia,
Yep.
in Eden. And
Yep.
then one day Eve said, I just found something yummy.
Yeah.
I want to share.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think, the again, is this what I think the importance the of Genesis and of the Bible is what is God trying to communicate to us, not using it as an exact biblical um or not as an exact historical account. And and I know a lot of people, and I want to get back to your questions, but I just want to kind of throw this in here too, is that there's so much talk about, well, you're not taking the Bible as your primary source, or you're not taking you're discounting the Bible, or I'm trying to think of some of the words that they use. And I think that's not true. I mean, I know it's not true because I know what's in my heart. um I just think that I think the Bible is way deeper than we sometimes can give it credit for. I think that it can speak to us in so much deeper ways. I think at a time in our lives, it can speak to us very literally. And there are parts of the Bible that are very literal. And there are parts of the Bible that are very metaphorical and poetic and stuff like this. And I just think that when we look at Genesis 1 through 11, and of course, that's where a lot of me is going to go, because that's where we're dealing with deep time and these things. I just think that that's where we can. Uh, I love the Bible. I do think it's God's truth, and I do think it's. And I'm not taking the scientific as my primary source or my worldview and putting it onto the Bible. I'm saying that God gave us both. He gave us his word, and he gave us the natural world, which he created, the two books, you know, um, and I try to read them together. But what are your thoughts on that? Uh, do you think I'm somehow discounting the Bible by putting these other things, by looking at it in the way I look at it? Because I wouldn't say I'm putting things onto the Bible, but
No, I've already told you that I have multiple heresies here that just completely fly in the face of it's just the way I make sense of what's going on. Whether Adam and Eve are spiritual beings that are eternal in nature, and God removes them from the eternal sphere, which God lives in the eternal. He sees all time at all times.
mhm.
So he's outside the universe, and he can observe the entire universe, the entire lifespan of the universe simultaneously. So, considering that's my perspective, in general, I can also look and say, well, but maybe Adam and Eve is a metaphoric treatment of man's development over the last, 800,000 years
Mhm.
with all the different offshoots. And man finally got to this point of Homo sapiens, and he has developed this consciousness, this idea of self and empathy and and where do we go from here? And at that point, we pick up the story with our first family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a heretic. I embrace that.
Well,
Um,
so and here's the other word, because you hear it from certain people all the time. Well, you hear it from young Earth creationists telling old Earth creationists that we're heretics all the time. Um, I've always heard that word is like, oh, it's this means you're like against God. Like I always heard it. I never looked up the definition. I looked up the definition the other day. I'm like, so you think outside the box? Is that what we're saying? Is that what heresy is? Is it thinking outside the box? Is that a an accurate
Heresy
definition of
was
that?
considered a bad word by the Catholics because they said everything is in this hierarchical structure. The Pope's up there just below God, and he says all of this is what you've got to believe because this is what. And so Galileo got irritated people because um he was messing with church politics, not so much because he could see other planets.
Mm-hmm.
But heresies come in all, but they would burn you for it sometimes. But heresies are basically you have a different, you walk a different path, and if you start with the premise that from John Donne, where no man is an island, neither yet a continent be, is that we have our own universe that we live in our heads, and we can never know. Like I can never know what you see as the color blue.
Yeah.
We say
Yeah.
blue, we point to things and say that's
Mm-hmm.
blue, but I don't know that you see the same thing that I see.
Right. I've thought about that before.
So,
Yeah.
so much less, theological. I can say I believe in God, and I believe in the grace that He has extended to me, and His evidence of that is dying for as blood price to pay for my sins.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have an idea of what that means to me, and you have an idea of what that means to you,
Mm-hmm.
and I can never be certain that you understand what I understand in the way that I understand it. So I consider that I'm starting off, everybody starts off as everybody lives in their heretical universe of their own. And we try to find commonality with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm automatically saying, I'm not gonna make you think that you have to believe what I am. So that's why I define it as this is my heresy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still on the path to truth and finding God
Yeah.
and
We all
and living
are.
in God's grace.
Absolutely. We
But I'm
all,
not
yeah.
going to say that you are definitely going to be matching what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's my point is this idea of like it's put out there as if it's this like they're insulting, oh, you're a heretic. And it's just like you said, we're all on that path to seeing how God speaks to us. I mean, obviously those of us who believe in God and and that is what our purpose, you know, our guide is in life. Not everybody out there is, but we're just trying to, or we're growing in that relationship and that growing deeper and looking into that. Yeah, if that's heresy, well, okay. Yes, I'm a heretic. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, I think that was really good, Calvin. Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I wish I had made this a longer um thing. We have about 17 more minutes left on the YouTube. I mean on the Zoom.
can we talk about Neanderthals and
Abs
brachiation?
Absolutely. Neanderthals and what?
Brachiation.
Okay.
Um, your shoulders, you can hang from a tree with your arm. Well, I automatically think of brachiation is and do they have brachiation shoulder joints?
No, I think that's one of the points. I th and
Oh,
I think I might have mentioned that in there because by then they were fully they weren't in the trees. Now, Australopithecines, Lucy, still was a lot in the trees. So she has a much stronger mix that probably, because we're always talking about the mixture. It's not about one trait or two traits or whatever. It's this mixture. And so Lucy and the Australopithecines, you're going to see them have some of that, but they have other traits that tell us that they were they were obligate bipedal. So they mostly walked bipedally. And so by the time you get to Neanderthals, and there's not, I say that also realizing it's not like the straight line of because some people get that confused because of that whole March of Progress thing. It's not like this straight line. It's a tree between the Australopithecines and the Neanderthals, but in those trees and in that, and even the term evolution, a lot of people will say they don't like the term evolution because it means it's better, because it's getting more human-like means it's better. But it really just means this change over time. And so what we see in this change over time is that by the Neanderthals are very much bipedal and not going through trees. So they
Okay.
wouldn't need that brachiation.
Well, we have brachiation. We can grab a limb and hang that.
Right, but it would eventually cause problems there.
Right. We don't do
Right.
that but we still have this. So what I'm looking at is, you're talking about the face is flatter
Yeah.
and the eyes are more, they can direct themselves more predatorily. Um, I see it as the Homo sapiens face is better suited to throwing a spear because they can look and look and look and look, because the Neanderthals seem to have a armored head. The chin was down. There was they couldn't look over their shoulder because their chin would hit their shoulder.
No. Okay.
No,
I don't think that
but
would.
I'm thinking that if you're going to throw a spear, the eyes, the way the Homo sapiens had it, is better suited for that.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be honest, that's not something that I've seen any studies done on, but just from what I know about it, I don't think there's a significant difference in the two of them in that way. When you're talking about the Neanderthals, I think their eyes are, I don't think there's a whole lot of, there's not a significant, they have the brow bone, the very heavy brow bone, but I don't think that would have impeded their ability to look around. And their neck
When one of the
certainly would.
graphics that you showed
Hmm.
showed the head, basically a side by side comparison of Homo sapien and Neanderthal. And Neanderthal, from the it was kind of shaped like this, and the eyes were here. So you had a lot of mouth and nose between. So with a Homo sapien, it was like this.
Uh-huh.
So there was, with the chin, that was when you're talking about, humans, or Homo sapiens having chins.
Uh-huh.
But the eyes were here,
Uh-huh.
and there wasn't anything below, so they could, there was less in the way of the eyes being directed.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I hear what you're saying. I just have not seen anything. I've not read or seen anything that would indicate there was any kind of difference in that.
Okay. Anyway, I was looking at
Hmm.
predatory features, or
Uh-huh.
how would that work because one of the things about deer and other prey animals is they want that peripheral going on.
Uh-huh.
They don't need to see in front because the grass is right below them. They don't care. But when you move the eyes to the front, now they're looking at things because they are focused on the hunt.
Yeah, but I just don't see that difference between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens for where their eyes were placed.
And humans have monkey hands, and we throw things, and we throw
So,
things hard.
and so did Neanderthals.
Okay. Then my other question is, how well suited were these short, stocky, big-bodied Neanderthals at persistence hunting?
Well, I mean that's interesting. I do think that because their barrel shaped chest, they would have had they would have had a lot of space for their lungs. But I do think that is one of those things, and I couldn't quote a study right now of it, but I do believe in there is an idea of which one of them were better for long distance. Because if you look at the length of the Homo sapiens, the Homo sapiens were more of the tall, slender, and
Gracile.
yeah, gracile, yeah, and but also the length they were
I got that
less.
vocabulary from you.
Thank you. They were less robust, which would be kind of the opposite of gracile. So it is possible that would lend itself better to that being able to run longer distance faster, like you see a cheetah versus like, an elephant or something. But I know there's a lot of, and this is where also we can go into this idea that Neanderthals may have been in small groupings, but I do think that one thing that we see in them is this hunting in packs, hunting together, that's how we also know that they had to have had a way of communicating to each other. And by now, early on, we weren't sure if they communicate, if they could speak. I always maintained that even if they couldn't speak, that was before they found the hyoid bones. Even if they couldn't speak, they had to have a way to communicate, because not speaking is not the only way you can communicate. You can sign language, you can
Yeah,
can raise your eyebrows a certain way, like there's just other ways.
really big, thick eyebrows.
Yeah, exactly, right? Those would have made a big difference from a distance, more than what we would have had. But yeah, so yeah, but I mean, it's an interesting question, but I would have to look into it to know for sure if there's any significant difference there, but not that I know of.
And my last question, I think, maybe not. Um, One of the things someone a dozen years or more ago, we talked about, this might have been in college even, about humans have different noses than chimpanzees. Chimpanzees have the opening and it's kind of up here.
Mm-hmm.
So swimming underwater is not a chimpanzee thing,
Uh-huh.
but it does look like it's a Neanderthal and Homo sapien thing,
Yeah.
because you can go underwater and the water doesn't automatically flood into your brachial passages,
Yeah.
bronchial passages.
Yeah.
So, any news about that?
I mean, it makes sense, but I mean,
When did it develop?
oh, oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd have to look back for sure. I would probably say something like that. If I'm trying to remember right now the different skull shapes. I would
Do
say
we
that
have a
had,
precursor that was an otter?
wait, are you talking about when did it develop in primates, or when did it develop in
Yeah,
the Homo genus, or just when? Oh gosh,
yeah.
that's so I'm just going to say that's way above my pay grade to know
Because I'm
exactly when.
looking at all the apes and the monkeys. Like, they can't swim
Yeah. I mean,
underwater.
yeah, that'd be interesting. I want to say that I think they can go in water, but yeah, I mean, I
I
just don't
mean,
know
there's
it.
some that are famous for going to the hot tub, and
But as
we
far as
always see
like
them on.
going under and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. I mean that that's just I just don't have
Okay.
that knowledge of primates in that way. But yeah, but as far as it developing for us, I want to say even the Australopithecines had noses that they could have, that were closer to ours. Yeah.
So they were otters.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Just swimming underwater, and
Okay.
attacking the packs. You know, grabbing other animals and dragging them underwater because they couldn't breathe underwater.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay.
Why did it become a feature that we needed?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of them. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I just, my knowledge comes from when we came out of the trees and forward. And even that, it's not like but I don't know before that.
Okay.
I mean, but
Anyway,
but I mean, talking about it from, and this is one of those things that I'd like to kind of go into at some point, the difference between kinds in the Bible and evolution. and looking at species and genus and all that kind of stuff. There is this idea that you would hear from a lot of young Earth creationists, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know where I fall on this because I don't think it's a matter of old Earth or young Earth. I think it's just a matter of did God, I believe that evolution and looking at these scientific ways of how things are is we can get an idea of how possibly God created. Like that, they're just to me, they're looking into this viewpoint into how possibly God created the world and created Earth and created us and all that kind of stuff. Um, I think it's interesting, but when you kind of start to go really far back about that, like you have these simple creatures that become more and more complex, and that's when we're seeing things like the noses change and stuff like that. Like what that path is. And again, we're talking about a bush, not a direct line. Um, you know, there is this idea of you
But
have
even the bush,
uh-huh.
at some point, you've got to bottleneck that bush so only the traits on that branch continue on.
Right.
Just because the nose is over here on the bush doesn't
Uh-huh.
mean it's over here with the Neanderthals or the Florensis
Yeah.
or the Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
So
So there must have been some sort of environmental pressure that created that
that
through
selected for
mutation.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that's where also so that's where I was trying to get to was so you have common ancestor and then everything goes up from that. Which makes sense if you look at the fossil record. But then there's this other idea that fits into the kinds where it's multiple common ancestors. And it's a like more of an orchard of life rather than a tree of life. I think it's an interesting concept that I would like to delve into more, but I don't have um, fossil record does fit more for tree of life. But again, yeah. But what regardless, I think God created it all. It's just seeing how he did. But hey, as we're closing out our last couple of minutes here, is there anything that well, I guess, yeah. Like, is there any last kind of like thing you want to approach that we didn't? Is there any topics that maybe I haven't covered? And I know you haven't seen all my videos, but like, is there any topics where faith and archaeology come together that you would like to explore more? Or it just, yeah. How do, yeah, go with that.
I just like to see where you're going on these things. But of course, the big question on every one of your listeners' mind is, well, what about the Nephilim?
I know. Well, I have that. So yes, that archaeologically, that probably that video because I do plan to do that video and it'll be one of the ones I do after I finish the Noah's flood one. It'll be kind of like part of that whole playlist. Um, but I'm very curious about the Nephilim and probably where it'll come into the archaeology because you've got to look at all these different references in the Bible about the giants and the Nephilim and then them being they were before Noah's Ark and then they were after Noah's Ark is what it says in the Bible, which is a very
And sons
curious.
of God and sons of man. And
Mhm. And so all of that is very curious to me. And then looking at it archaeologically and how you fit what we see in the Bible with what we see in the fossil record. And that's probably going to put me into some, where they find these giants in the archaeological record. That's a lot of pseudoscience. We'll see. I'll try to
how
find
many
some very hard science on that.
how many stones did David pick up as he approached Goliath?
I think 5.
How many brothers did Goliath have?
I don't know. Did he have 5? Am I wrong on my
Four
number?
brothers.
Oh,
Four brothers.
and did he pick up 5 stones? Am I remembering that
He
correctly?
picked up 5 stones.
Oh, that's interesting. So you think
So
that his brothers were behind him, and David was
they mentioned
planning
that
to?
Goliath had 4 brothers, and then David picked up 5 stones and took out Big Brother.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Ah, was David planning a follow-up.
Yeah. So are you seeing Goliath as a Nephilim? Is that why,
He's a
was that where
giant.
you made that connection or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
as one of the giants that in the Bible, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
but
very interesting.
I was listening to a sermon and he brought that in. I was like, okay, I like that he picked up 5 stones, used one, and looked at the brothers and went,
Yeah.
yeah, got yeah, got
Anybody else ready for my
I
little
took
boy?
him out. I'll take
Yeah.
you
For
out
this
too.
little dog. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So was that
Yeah.
a good teaser at the end?
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yes.
Nephilim seems to
Perfect.
be your teaser.
Woohoo. Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. I mean, again, subscribe if you want to get alerted to when I have those. I don't put out, you know, videos on a regular basis. So yeah, subscribe if you want to see those. Thank you, Calvin, for coming on here. This was a lot of fun. It was as much fun as I thought it was going to be. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to put it out. I'm excited to introduce my brother, my big brother, to everybody else. And I appreciate it. And we'll have to do this again. And are you going to join me for my talk with Dr. Ken Wolgamuth? He's the
I may
geologist.
not I may not have the complete liberty to do that, but
Okay.
I might join in the background.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, all right. Well, hopefully that last part recorded. I don't know. It says 0, but it's also still saying it's recording. So I don't know how that works. So that'll be something to test out. All right,
There we go.
all right, all
All
right.
right,
Love
see ya.
you. All right, love you.
Love you too.
Bye bye.